Welcome to the night section. Now, we know the Grammys, for anyone who is an artist or an aspiring artist, most of us have grown up idolizing the Grammys, dreaming that someday we might have a collection of our own. Perhaps you were like me and you were in the shower practicing your acceptance speech, giving your shoutouts to your day ones and the people who have supported you throughout this entire journey. And let's not forget, of course, flexing on the people who doubted you. Now, the Grammys for a long time was considered to be the upper echelon of upper echelons of any type of award bestowed upon the artist. I mean, look, for a long time, a very long time, and even today, some of your favorite artists would skip the BET Awards, Brit Awards, the American Music Awards, but never the Grammys if they were nominated in any category. Some of the greatest artists of all time have won multiple Grammys, like Michael Jackson, who has won 13, Kanye West, who has won 22, Jay-Z, who has won 23, and Beyonce, who recently made history with 28 Grammys, becoming the most Grammy-winning female artist ever and garnering more awards than any performer, male or female, according to the Rolling Stones. And the list goes on and on, but it seems that the Grammys, especially in recent years, by public opinion, has snubbed a lot of deserving artists. And for those of you guys who don't know what a Grammy is, or the process of actually being eligible to win a Grammy, and who decides who actually wins a Grammy, let me do a brief and rather general breakdown. The Grammy Award, originally called the Gramophone Award, according to Wikipedia, is an award presented by the Recording Academy to recognize achievements in the music industry. The trophy depicts a glided gramophone, and the annual presentation ceremony features performances by prominent artists and the presentation of those awards that have a more popular interest. In simpler terms, this is basically an event that is held every year to recognize excellence in the music industry. Whether you agree with that sentiment or not is your business, but that is what is basically advertised to the masses. In the past couple of years, the Grammys had 30 fields, and within those fields, 80 plus categories, spanning from the best rap song to the best Latin jazz album and everything in between. And the number of categories would fluctuate up and down depending on the year. In the first edition of the Grammys, they actually had only 28 categories, and this was back in 1959, and was at its highest with 110 categories only 12 years ago in 2009. Obviously, you're not seeing every single person who has won in every single category on TV. The event would probably be 18 hours long, and you, the viewer, would probably lose interest right away. So they condensed the televised show down to the usual 8 to 12 categories, the more quote-unquote popular categories, which includes what they call the Big Four, which is in the general field, meaning that this is across all genres, and that's 1, Record of the Year, 2, Album of the Year, 3, Song of the Year, and 4, Best New Artist. And if you win only one of these, this is a big deal in the music industry, let alone 2 or 3. And only 2 artists in history managed to win all 4. Christopher Cross back in 1981, and our dear beloved Billie Eilish in 2020, winning Best New Artist, the Song of the Year with Bad Guy, the Record of the Year with again the song Bad Guy, and Album of the Year for When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? And Billie Eilish accomplished this feat at only 18 years old. As for how she got there and how many of these artists get to the Grammy stage is by having their recordings entered by members of the Recording Academy who are either professional or voting members. To clarify, the artists themselves don't need to be members of the Recording Academy, but need to have a member or a media company, for example, registered with the Academy to submit entries for consideration. And these members are usually other artists, musicians, songwriters, and so on, essentially their peers. However, to even qualify for a Grammy, like for example, this past 63rd Grammy Awards, you would think the common sense thing is to have a release eligible from the prior calendar year. For example, this past award show was in 2021, so releases from January 2020 to December 2020 should be eligible, right? Wrong. Actually, artists who were nominated for Grammys had to have a release from September 2019 to August 2020. Meaning if you released a track in September of 2020, you would only be eligible for a Grammy in 2022. According to the Recording Academy, quote, recordings must be commercially released in general distribution in the United States, i.e. sales by label to a branch or recognized independent distributor, via the internet, or mail order or retail sales for a nationally marketed product. Recordings must be available for sale from any date within the eligibility period through at least the date of the current year's voting deadline, end quote. This means, realistically, as long as your music is submitted by a member and released within the eligibility period, you as an independent artist might very well be eligible for a Grammy. But don't take my word for it. Please do your own due diligence on the subject. Maybe I might even do an entire breakdown in another video, but for now you guys have a general idea of how artists get a chance at a nomination. Now let's take a brief look at the actual voting process. So we covered that the voting members of the Academy are actually the artists' peers, so they can be artists themselves, musicians, engineers, songwriters, etc. However, to even be qualified to be a voting member, according to thebalancedcareers.com, quote, voting members must have creative or technical credits on at least 6 commercially released tracks on a physical music release or 12 on a digital album. Voting members must also be in good standing with their dues, which is only $100 a year, end quote. And this isn't just it. It's not enough to actually be a creative, but according to the Grammy site, you have to, quote, get 2 strong recommendations from music industry peers. The Recording Academy does not accept self-recommendations. Applications with self-recommendations will be considered incomplete and will not be processed, end quote. In other words, this means the barrier to entry is pretty high. In order for you to even have a say on who gets a Grammy, you have to know someone who knows someone that's an industry insider. So we covered number 1, eligibility for a Grammy, and number 2, who decides on the Grammys, which are obviously the voting members. Now to the actual voting process, which could be broken down into 5 steps as follows. Number 1, submission. Number 2, screening. Number 3, nominating. Number 4, special nominating committee. And number 5, final voting. Now, once you go through the submission process, you go through the screening process, where they obviously decide if your song or video followed the guidelines and are even eligible in the first place, as well as dispersing everything to its respective category. For example, if you make rock music and the music experts go through the checklist and find that it meets the criteria of a rock song, then it goes into the rock section. Then we go into nominations, where the voting members get the first round of ballots. According to the Grammy website, quote, members are directed to vote only in their areas of expertise. They may vote in up to 15 categories in the genre fields, plus 4 categories of the general field. So that's Record of the Year, Album of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best New Artist. Ballots are tabulated by the independent accounting firm of Deloitte, end quote. After the nominations, the special nominating committee, again per the Grammy site, quote, in craft and other specialized categories, final nominations are determined by national nomination review committees comprised of voting members from all of the Academy's chapter cities, end quote. The Academy chapter cities are cities across America, which include Atlanta, Chicago, Florida, Los Angeles, Memphis, Nashville, New York City, the Pacific Northwest, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Texas, and Washington, D.C., which are basically the hubs for music professionals across America. The last stage is the final voting, which again from the Grammy site is, quote, final round ballots are sent to voting members in good due standing. The finalists determined by special nominating committees are also included in this ballot. In this final round, Recording Academy members may vote in up to 15 categories in the genre fields plus 4 categories of the general field. Ballots again are tabulated by the independent accounting firm of Deloitte, end quote. This is obviously self-explanatory and taken directly from the Grammy site, where I recommend you guys actually take a deep dive and inform yourself on everything about the Grammys. But I basically explained the entire process as best as I could in a condensed fashion. Now, the controversy comes in when we talk about Grammy snubs. Now, historically, we have seen time and time again that a lot of artists have been snubbed. So whether that be not being nominated or nominated for a category or categories and not winning the Gilded Gramophone. Since I explained somewhat the process, this can give you guys better context of how a Grammys actually won. And according to the information, which has been for the most part sourced directly from the Grammys website, it seems pretty reasonable with how this process goes, though it still leaves some questions in terms of perhaps who these voting members are, if there is any bias to even becoming a voting member, how much industry politics is even involved within the voting process, and I can go on and on. And today I'll be discussing 3 times where the Grammy voting system has completely failed by public opinion. So we know for sure, based on the information, that album sales, for example, are not a contributing factor to any of these awards, which in my opinion is a good thing in terms of taking the music for what it is, rather than just judging the music on popularity. Because oftentimes, and I think most of us can agree, that popular music doesn't always mean good music in terms of technicality and complexity of the music. But then again, it could be a problem when talking about impact. So for the first Grammy snub in my 3 that I'll be discussing in history is 2017 Album of the Year, Adele's 25 over Beyonce's Lemonade. So there's this common theme in everyday life and on the internet that the rich and already successful should be grateful for what they already have. So if they don't win an award, they shouldn't care that much. And this is partly true, but a lot of people disregard the fact that the majority of rich people who weren't born into billionaire families had to work for what they got. And a lot of artists, especially an artist like Beyonce, have worked tirelessly for years upon years to earn their seat at the table. Even the former manager of Michael Jackson, Ron Wisner, in the book Listen Out Loud, mentioned Beyonce as the only person in the industry that even came close to the work ethic of a Michael Jackson, and that says a lot. So in 2017, by not just my opinion, but the opinion of the masses, she was snubbed for Album of the Year with the Lemonade album. This isn't to say that the other nominees didn't have great projects, and Adele didn't have an incredible album with the album 25. But in terms of world impact, it's crazy to think that Beyonce didn't win. And of course, as we know, the voting process doesn't consider album sales. But shouldn't they consider the impact and overall projects or songs that shift the culture? It makes you really wonder, what does Beyonce have to do to get that Academy acknowledgement for her projects? I mean, yes, she has 28 Grammys under her belt now, but with all the work she has put in, she has never won Album of the Year at the Grammys. And the reason why it makes a lot of people upset is because they put these artists in the front rows and have them perform for views and ratings, dangle nominations in front of them, make it seem like they're going to win, just to have them go home empty-handed. Luckily in this situation, Adele, though she was very deserving of that award, knew in her heart that the award should have gone to Beyonce, and she acknowledged the fact in her very emotional acceptance speech, which I found very admirable because she didn't need to say anything. I mean, she had a great album, but as they say, greatness recognizes greatness. Then we have number 2 in the list of Grammy snubs. 2021, The Weeknd with no Grammy nominations for After Hours. So this was a shock to most people. It makes no sense as The Weeknd dropped a monumental album, in my opinion, with After Hours, which dropped in March 20th of 2020. We have seen a couple tweets from him addressing the situation with, quote, "The Grammys remain corrupt, you owe me, my fans, and the industry transparency," end quote. Then continuing with, quote, "Collaboratively planning a performance for weeks to not being invited. In my opinion, 0 nominations equals you're not invited," end quote. And this definitely made fans very angry. And frankly, it's disappointing because not only was this a critically acclaimed album across the board, I personally think it was one of the best albums that really shifted the landscape in terms of sonics in the pop and R&B genre, bringing elements of 80s synth pop, and probably one of his most cohesive albums to date. And that's everything from the production, his vocals, to the lyricism and storytelling, which was A1 in my opinion. Not to mention the start of this year performing at the Super Bowl. But he didn't even get a Grammy nomination for his visuals, which I thought was really odd. One thing was the music, but not even a music video, not even Heartless, or especially the video for Until I Bleed Out, when The Weeknd stayed in the 80s character for over a year. Now, this is the most I have seen anyone really commit to a character for their album. And again, we could talk about the numbers, though the Grammy doesn't quote-unquote look at album sales. According to Wikipedia, quote, After Hours debuted at #1 on the US Billboard 200 with 444,000 album equivalent units, including 275,000 pure album sales. It is The Weeknd's 4th #1 album and marks the biggest first week sales of 2020 for an album at the time, end quote. And not to mention, all 14 of those songs charted in the Hot 100 Billboard charts, with 10 of them in the top 40, and his monster single Blinding Lights at #1 after the first week, which broke the record for the most weeks spent in the top 5 on the Hot 100 charts, and spent a record-breaking 52 weeks or otherwise an entire year in the charts top 10 at the time of the recording of this video, according to Hot New Hip Hop. So it makes you wonder, as The Weeknd mentioned himself, about the transparency of this final nomination and voting process, referring to the quote-unquote secret committees he mentioned in the New York Times article, referring again to the 4th step of the voting process, in which we learned is the special nominating committee. It's unfortunate for popular music because, like The Weeknd, a lot of artists are discouraged from even participating in these events, and are taking it up a notch like The Weeknd just did to not even submit their music ever again. And third, we have one of the biggest upsets in recent Grammy history, which was 2014 Best Rap Album, Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, The Heist, over Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City. Now, this was an entire debacle, and I'm going to take you guys back a bit. If you guys recall, in 2014, Kendrick Lamar completely got snubbed with an album that almost 10 years later is considered one of the greatest hip-hop and albums period of all time, which was Good Kid, Mad City, with an album nobody even thinks about today, which is The Heist by Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. This is another testament to the Grammy committee just being completely oblivious and clueless to actual impact and to what actually shapes the culture in a significant way. I remember watching the 56 Grammy Awards and was utterly shocked. Kendrick Lamar was nominated for 7 categories, including Best New Artist, Rap Song of the Year, Album of the Year, Best Rap Album, Best Rap Performance, Best Rap Song Performance, and Best R&B Performance, and won 0. Good Kid, Mad City dropped October 22nd, 2012, which I think was past the eligibility time for the 55th Grammys, which would have been in 2013, but was obviously eligible for the 2014 56 Grammy Awards. Now, if we talk about album sales, Good Kid, Mad City obviously blows The Heist out of the water 100%. So today, at least for this portion, I won't be focusing on sales per se, because clearly, as the previous examples have shown, the committees disregard that completely. But let's talk about the actual substance of each album. So I've listened to Good Kid, Mad City over 30 times at this point from cover to cover, but for the sake of this video, I decided to listen to Macklemore and Ryan Lewis's The Heist, and it just doesn't compare. Kendrick Lamar was storytelling in such an intricate fashion that really made you feel like you were with him on almost a journey of self-discovery, what it means to be a kid from Compton, especially in songs like The Art of Peer Pressure. And he gave such an even keel album with more introspective songs, but also bangers, like with the song Mad City as an example. And Kendrick Lamar has this unique ability to make enjoyable sounding music in terms of sonics without compromising the messages in his songs. And frankly, The Heist wasn't a terrible album at all, but it just isn't as memorable as a Good Kid, Mad City. It has great songs, don't get me wrong, like I enjoy the songs Make the Money and even their smash Thrift Shop, but it just pales in comparison to a Good Kid, Mad City on everything, including lyricism, production, and just the art of rapping in general. It was more of a pop record for me personally. In my opinion, just because you're rapping doesn't make it hip-hop, but that's something I may discuss in another video. But to make things worse, however, after the award show in 2014, Macklemore decided to send Kendrick a text after winning Best Rap Album, saying, quote, "You got robbed. I wanted you to win. You should have. It's weird and sucks that I robbed you." I was gonna say that during the speech, then the music started playing and I froze. Anyway, you know what it is. Congrats on this year and your music. Appreciate you as an artist and as a friend. Much love, end quote. Now, this isn't inherently a bad thing to say, but still weird. And it gets real weird when you want to post that on social media and publicize the exchange. Your authenticity comes into question when you do stuff like that, and honestly, he was just better off not saying anything. Way to add insult to injury. But there you guys have it, the Grammys, and 3 of the many times Grammys just got it flat out wrong. Let me know what you guys think. Let's discuss this in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, please be sure to subscribe. Please leave a comment below and engage about anything you like throughout the video. As well, please leave a like and hit the bell notification if you do want to see more. Night section out.